So I'm Maximilian Jenkins. You can call me Max. I'm here to do a presentation with you all on understanding depression. Just real quick, by a show of hands, do you know a lot about depression, a little bit, or nothing at all? This is a new thing. A lot? Okay. What about you, sir? A little bit? Okay, cool. So I'm going to ask you real quick before we dive right into the presentation. I don't know if you've already done it. If you can look at one of your handouts, it should say pre and post survey on it. If you could fill out that pre-survey real quick, that would greatly help me so I can improve this presentation in the future. And then at the end of the presentation, I'll remind you to do the post survey. And then just give me a big thumbs up whenever you're done. All right, cool, good to go? All right, cool. This is understanding depression. So, come on. Okay, there we go. Okay, so what is depression? I like to go from my presentations going from very broad to narrow, so we'll start with what it is. So it is a serious medical illness. A lot of times part of the issue with the stigmatization of it is it often gets mistaken as sadness. Sorry, I'm gonna adjust this a little bit. Sorry, it gets just mistaken as sadness, but obviously those who suffer from depression or know the actual symptoms of it, it's actually a much more chronic condition that can end up affecting everybody's life from mental, physical, and emotional well-being. Sorry, Wendy, it looked like you were waving. Okay, so anyway, characterized by the CDC as a public health issue, which is another interesting piece of this. It's a public health issue, and you'll see later on the statistics we have on how many people suffer from depression worldwide, but it's still very, very hard to talk about in most circles. It's a very stigmatized illness, so kind of keep that in mind as you're listening to all this. And then big characteristic of it is prolonged sadness and lowered mood. So that's just kind of generally how we view people who are depressed, is having that depressed state. Sadness, again, I think that's often where the stigmatization lies, is that's just what we see, but we don't actually know how those people feel on the inside sometimes, so it can be a little harder to kind of empathize with that. And a big piece of this again is those who have depression are at increased risks of suicide from those who don't have depression, and that's going to be a big thing in addressing this issue, is trying to prevent that issue as well. So is this all cool so far? Awesome. So I'm going to have you look at your second handout. It's a big list of things. I think it says self-assessment at the top. And this is a little exercise. You don't have to actually fill it out. I encourage you not to actually, but just go through it real quick in your head and see whether or not you check yes or no on any of those questions after reading the condition for it. And then again, when you're done, just give me a big thumbs up and I'll know to continue with my presentation. So what I just had you read, and I will disclaim, I am not a psychologist, so this is not any sort of actual diagnosis tool, but what you just read are the 9 symptoms for depression as characterized by the APA and the DSM, which is the Diagnostical and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. That's the official thing that they use in psychology to diagnose mental illnesses. So this is kind of how they go through that process. So in addition to something as we commonly view it as sadness and all that other stuff, a lowered mood, these are other conditions by which you'd have to meet in order to be clinically diagnosed with depression. So it can look like a lot of other things than just sadness. Another big piece is you have to have 5 of these symptoms for at least 2 weeks out of the 9. And you have to display a depressed mood and/or anhedonia, which is the inability to experience pleasure. So all those things are what you have to have in order to be classified as clinically depressed. So moving into our next slide, there's more than just one type of depression. Depression is just not one thing. There are multiple types. The most common type, the reason I picked the 4 on the screen here is this is what's more commonly going to be seen in especially a college campus setting. So major depressive disorder, this is typically what you're going to see most commonly. These are just depressive episodes. So, someone might experience it again for at least 2 weeks. So for at least 2 weeks to another period of time, and then time will pass, another depressive episode, time will pass of normalcy, another depressive episode. So that's kind of how that one goes, a back and forth, and this is often what you'll see in most people. Then you have chronic depression, which used to be called dysthymia in older editions of the DSM. This would be lesser than episodes, but you experience them for a longer period of time. I believe the actual time in order to be classified as this is 2 years. With having less than 2 months between, less than 2 months of a break between depression, you know what I mean? So that one goes into that one. And then Bipolar disorder actually is another interesting one, since that we often think of as just being characterized as extreme moods, which it is, but, oh wait, crap, I couldn't find the marker. Sorry, so I was gonna draw a little diagram because this actually shows the complexity of other depressive disorders. With bipolar disorder, there's actually two types of bipolar disorder. Bipolar 1 is probably what you classically think of as bipolar disorder. That is extreme levels of mania met with extreme levels of depressive mood on the flip side. And those can be from, happen between weeks, days, months, etc. Bipolar 2 is mania, which mania is characterized as like heightened mood, but that's not necessarily always good, because people in mania can have their judgment can be very skewed by that because of, sorry, I'm trying to think of a word. Their judgment can be skewed on things because they're at a heightened sense of elation, and then in depressive mood, same thing, but in the inverse. Bipolar 2 would be a lesser depressive state, but still experiencing mania. So again, that's just kind of, with especially this diagram right here, this isn't just one thing. There's a lot of things that are characterized as depression. It can manifest in many different ways and look very different from person to person. And then, oh, hello. You gonna say, you want them to sign in, Wendy? Okay, sorry, never mind. So then, especially since we're coming up on fall and winter here, seasonal affective disorder is a type of depression that happens during the winter months. When it gets colder outside, there's less sunlight. Often you stay inside a lot more, so you're not getting as much exercise outside. So that can start to affect people, and again, especially since we're moving into the colder months of the year. And again, you can look at this diagram and see there are many types of depression. So who does it affect? It affects 300 million people worldwide. So it is actually one of the most diagnosed conditions in the world, and that's just diagnosed. So there's probably a lot more people that just haven't been diagnosed with the condition. And this is across all age groups. So this would be from young children to older senior adults. And then going smaller into the US, 16.1 million adults are affected by it in the US. So a caveat to that number is you have to have at least suffered from at least one depressive episode. So that number can again even reflect that there are people who have suffered at least one, but there's also some that have had a higher severity of more episodes than one. And this represents 6.7% of adults in the United States. So that's actually a pretty big number for how many people are actually suffering from depression, and we don't often talk about it in public. And most prevalent in age range is 18 to 25. So that would be, again, our age range for the average college student. So that's exactly why we're trying to give this presentation today, to provide a little bit of knowledge on the subject for college students. And then depression in college students. So 30% of college students reported being depressed. So that's about 1 in 3, quite a few people. And it often messes with like the functioning of that student. So it can be impaired studying habits, reckless decision making. I mean, there's all sorts of things that this can affect in certain aspects of your life if unaddressed. That's why we try to push services here on campus to help with those who are suffering from depression or feel like they may be suffering from depression. Why this happens is college is a really rough transitionary time. I don't know about all of you, but it can be really hard to adjust, especially if you're a first generation college student like I was. I didn't really have a lot of direction coming into college, so it made it very, very hard to kind of transition easily into this new and drastically different environment where I was given so much freedom to do whatever I wanted to do. Very hard to like kind of formulate that structure if you don't have any sort of like actual direction helping you out here. So I mean, for a lot of people, it's the first time being away from home, which that's a huge step for most people. Most people have obviously lived the first 18 years of their life with their parents, which drastic step when you don't have someone waking you up anymore, or making sure that you're doing okay or doing your homework and all that stuff. All that stuff can pile up if you don't have a good support system. Then struggling to maintain and form relationships. You're going to meet a lot of new people in college. I'm sure you already have. You might even be older than me. I don't even know. But in trying to do that, again, there's a turbulence with as you add more people into your life and try to add more people into your life that can cause more factors and stress. And then stress to maintain good grades. I mean, nobody wants to do badly in college, so there's obviously the desire to excel in college, and that can often put a huge stress on you, especially if you're a perfectionist student trying to achieve all A's in a subject or all your subjects. So what it can feel like, this is kind of the meatier portion of it. Again, going back to what I said at the beginning of the presentation, it can be very hard to think of depression as more than just being sad for a period of time. There's so much more that kind of goes into it. And one story I like is the myth of Sisyphus. So Sisyphus, he was in Greek mythology. He did some stuff to the gods. They got really mad at him, and he was punished by having to roll a boulder up the hill every day. And when he got to the top, it would constantly roll down. So why I like this story when I'm trying to describe depression to people is because that's how I can feel being depressed sometimes, is you work so hard to try and get better or to make it through the day, and then next day, next time, you have to go through it again and again and again without any real break, you know what I mean? And it can be very damaging to see all your achievements roll right back down to the bottom and you have to start all over. So that's kind of why I like that story. It nicely encapsulates, I think, in a way. I mean, did that kind of help you guys visualize it a little bit or at all? Okay, and then again, playing into those bigger themes, the persistent sadness and hopelessness, having to physically, get yourself up the hill, push your depression up the hill, make it through the day. Again, connecting and abstracting those greater concepts into the story. And then it's commonly comorbid, with other disorders, so like anxiety and ADHD and ADD. So that's another thing that can make it very, very hard for a person suffering from depression to function, is because they're often going to have other things weighing down on them. So it can all kind of spiral into this greater condition where you have many factors weighing in on you, along with just daily life-to-life things. And then this can lead into the obviously worst thing of suicidal ideation. And that's what we'll address in the next. So 6% of college students reported considering suicide. So that's almost 1 in 10 people considering that. That's a little bit too high. I think that most of us would be comfortable with seeing. I think we'd like to see that much lower number, probably even none. But that's, again, a big risk that we see when we're trying to, find people, recommend resources to those who are depressed or suffering from depression or other conditions, is trying to make sure that they do not get to this state. This is obviously worst case scenario. 1% having reported attempted suicide, so that would be within the college setting. So again, of those who did it, 1% saying that they had attempted it. Again, that's just another step closer to like that ultimate worst case scenario. And then it's the third leading cause of death in 18 to 24. Again, that's within our age range. So this is obviously like a huge issue that needs to be addressed since it is like so high of a cause of death within those within our age range. And then other negative effects, self-harm, that's a way to often cope with the pain for some people. So like cutting, burning, bruising, all those things can cause can kind of lead down that path to doing the absolute worst. And that's why we try to address it. And then poor academic performance, again, it kind of feeds into itself. You're depressed, so you're starting to do badly in your classes, so you start to end up not performing as well, and that can kind of feed into the depression because you're not doing as well. So then you're feeling worse and worse, and then you're not doing well, and then it can all just again spiral out of control into this ultimate unfortunate conclusion. But fortunately, there are ways to combat depression. So one really good resource is obviously counseling, which we do have counseling services here. It used to be on campus, but now we're down at Lafine, 2 blocks down, right, Wendy? Yeah, 2 blocks away over on Sunset Avenue. So if you know someone or you yourself need to go see resources, or even if you're just lacking, like, or if you just need like a push in the right direction, counseling services is great to go see real quick. But then we have antidepressants for those, which those are often stigmatized though, so they can be a little hard to suggest to people. And again, you'd have to go to a medical doctor to be prescribed those. And then relaxation and mindfulness techniques. These are just everyday little things you can do to kind of, ease your mind, lower stress, feel a little bit better about yourself, more confident about yourself. So that can be things like yoga, meditation, muscle relaxation, breathing exercises. Does anybody ever have to do these? The like breathing exercises or anything? Okay. But yeah, I mean, using any combination of these is going to be better than not using any of them at all. And that's often an issue that most people are going to face, especially in college. You don't have a lot of time to do things. So it can just seem easier to not address these issues than to actually go forth and address them and try to figure out how to get around them, overcome them, and whatnot. Services on campus. So counseling services, like I said, we got relocated over to Lafine, the bottom level. So that's in room 101. Yeah, room 101 over at Lafine in the basement. That's the phone number for this. This is all actually in the stapled handout. I have a kind of like a brief overview of the notes that I have on here, just in case you forget any of this. I understand obviously you're not going to remember a phone number or anything. So in case you need any of that, it's all on that sheet should you need to reference back to it. Nice thing about counseling services, again, here on campus is first 4 sessions are free per fiscal year. So that's covered within your tuition. So you can come by for those 4 free sessions and then go meet with a staff or licensed staff psychologist, and they can help you with whatever you need there. They're trained in a multitude of situations. And then from 5 to 10, it's $15, and then 10 and up, it's $25 per session. So it's still very affordable by comparison to off-campus counseling resources. So that's definitely something to consider if you or, again, someone needs those resources. And then Office of Student Life, if you're having a really tough situation, you can go over to the Office of Student Life, and they'll work with you and your professors to make sure that you're staying academically healthy, or if you need deadline extensions, you can do that. And I believe Wendy, isn't Office of Student Life over on Anderson, or in Anderson Hall, right? Holton Hall, my bad, okay. Over in Holton Hall, so you can reference them if you need. And then for emergencies, so this is obviously if someone's planning on killing themselves or is talking about killing themselves, you can definitely call 911. That's probably the best situation if they're trying to. And then for someone who's maybe having suicidal ideations, National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, you can actually text them too, which is really good because I know some people in those situations can't necessarily talk or think straight. So a text would be much better for them so they can kind of do it at their own pace. And then, any questions? Then these are just some useful links and the sources I used for this presentation. Should you need them, again, those are on the back of the sheet if you'd like to reference them again.